And I'm Jess.
And this is a walk in the woods at midnight, where we like to review movies that you may have already seen, movies that are available to you on platforms like Netflix, Hulu, Prime, Amazon Prime, and these are always horror films. Our favorite. My dog got so scared as soon as I said that she left the room. So anyway, this week we saw the Babadook.
And your husband would have been horrified because I had to pay for this one on Apple TV.
I know. I paid for it on Amazon.
On
And then he said,
Amazon,
"What's
okay.
this $4 that I spent here on Amazon?" I was like, "Don't
$4.
worry about it." So, should I just give a quick
Sure.
walkthrough of the
Yeah.
plot? Okay, so the plot basically is that it opens around the time of year where it is this child's birthday. There is a single mom and a child. It's a time around his birthday. In fact, the movie opens actually with her on the way to the hospital, ready to give birth to her son. And during this ride to the hospital, they have a car crash and the father dies. So that's what we know. And then it kind of it shows you now today where they are. And basically we see, a woman who is, she's like a nurse for the elderly. She's kind of struggling it seems like it's maybe a minimum wage or hourly job. She is having a few difficulties with keeping up with her precocious young son. And she's clearly been kind of suppressing a lot of these things. And basically, this movie is about arguably a lot of different things. But basically what happens is things get out of control. She reads the boy a book one night that he mysteriously finds on his bookshelf, and it is called Mr. Babadook. And it's totally creepy because it is a pop-up book for children, and it's actually very violent. So she reads about half of it. The boy's convinced that Mr. Babadook is real. She keeps denying it until it takes over everything, and chaos ensues. Did I do okay? Did I miss anything?
Chaos ensues sums it up nicely.
Indeed, right?
Yeah. Well, we can tell from the beginning, without our getting into spoilers, that she has been through a lot because she, as you said, she's suppressing a lot of things, and this child suffers from nightmares. But she's already been through a lot because she gets into bed with him and he curls up around her, and even at that point, she pulls away from him. In the very beginning of the movie, she pulls away from him and just wants her own space in the bed.
And this is the son who she's pulling.
This is the son, yeah. She doesn't even want the son's touch at this point. She just wants her own space in the bed and doesn't even want the son to curl up on her. And to me, that was the sign that she was already near the breaking point with this kid who suffers from nightmares, suffers from believing that monsters are real, can't get along with other kids. He doesn't seem really violent, but he does have these outbursts and doesn't get along with other kids at all. And just these monsters under his bed have taken over his life, and he just cannot get along with anyone. And she's fraying like at the beginning of the movie. And the Babadook is like, she's hanging on by a strand at this point. And so let me actually, before we get into the movie, let me ask you something, since you are more of a seasoned veteran of these movies than I am. These are kind of your hobby, right? These kind of movies.
Yeah. I mean, an over-analysis of everything in life is my hobby. I go to a store and I'm like, why was that guy so mean? Or whatever.
Okay,
good. Having a bad day, but
because
he gave his son a dirty look. Yeah.
Okay, good. Because analysis is what I'm asking for here, because I've noticed two things as we've done this show. I feel like we've done probably 10 shows and watched probably 15 movies at this point.
Hmm.
And I've noticed, with the exception of The Ritual, which was all male, and
Yeah.
maybe Train to Busan, there's two things I've noticed. Well, one thing I've noticed with all the movies, but two things I've noticed is, one is the women in these movies seem to get all the heavy lifting.
Hmm.
I've noticed that in all the movies, with the exception of The Ritual, it's the women who get the meatiest parts and do all the heavy lifting in these movies. Like this movie, now this is an Australian movie, and I wasn't familiar with this actress, Elsie
Hmm.
Roberts or whatever. What was her name?
I think that's right.
She had, I mean, she ran through emotions I didn't even know were there. She did an amazing job, but this is her movie, and it seems like, now you've seen a lot more of these movies than I have. Is that all the movies we've seen, all the women do the heavy lifting? Is that
Like
would you?
customary, or
Yeah, is that customary in these kinds of movies?
I would say that in horror films in general, um, this is pretty new. I think that
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
I think I don't know. It's hard to say. The woman is always, sort of the stereotypically speaking. It's sort of like the virgin female is always the last one standing. But she has to be virtuous, and she has to be sort of like she's pursued, and then in the end she defeats whatever evil force this is by either being sort of good and virginal. At least this is my impression, and I
Yeah.
feel like this is kind of stereotypical enough that, like, Scream the movie, which sort of almost sort of parodied horror films, has kind of kept, I mean, you can watch that and basically see every, they openly sort of mock some of these conventions. And that's definitely one of them. It's sort of like the slutty girl always gets it first, and then the boyfriend. It's like they want to ease you into, like, sort of
Okay.
feeling like, well, that girl or guy deserves it, particularly girl often. and and so, but the girl is mainly treated like a victim. I would say the female character, I would say, was always kind of typically treated like a victim. And so now there's this onslaught of films where women are sort of maybe the aggressors, but
Hmm.
then they might not really have been in the past, or the, and I think now women are um, being put into that role of being the aggressors. And I think there's also a big turn in horror movies in general toward really helping you to identify with the sort of bad guy. Like, not not in all films, but in the ones that we're watching, and I think in the ones that are most acclaimed, I would say that we are we are kind of being told the perspective from their point of view, because I think people are kind of getting bored with this two-dimensional, here's a bad guy, here's a good guy, big whoop. It's like,
Hmm.
we know, so in this way you're kind of confused as to who to root for, and why, and oh my god, why am I getting swept up in understanding this evil character? So I think there's a lot, there are deeper things going on, and I think that
Ah,
there are definitely more roles for women. And I don't know if it's to thwart the old convention or not, but you're right, a lot of these have been, and I don't know if I've pushed it in that direction by, like, recommending certain things, but the ones that you've recommended as well
I've recommended movies just based on the fact of what I've read, and
about them.
I
Yeah.
haven't. I just now noticed it, and what you just said led me to my next point, which was, I don't. Um, at at this point, I'm thinking that you and I are sort of students of the genre. I know you are, but I don't think these movies get enough credit for my next point, and that is, they are a lot deeper in examining issues, more than just horror. All these movies we've watched are, um, examining a lot of familial issues. The relationship in the Babadook deals with the woman's loss of her husband, her relationship with her son, dealing with her feelings towards her son, and as you said, her suppressing her feelings, and now all of a sudden they're coming out. But all these other issues, like in the ritual, it was. I remember we were dealing with the the guy's feelings of guilt for not standing up for his friend,
Mm-hmm.
and how he dealt with that throughout the rest of the movie. And all of these movies have lots of layers to them that I don't know that these movies get credit for, sort of in the general population, because everybody just says, oh, horror movies, they're just meant to scare you. But there's a lot of layers to these movies of um, uh,
Like human
dealing.
psychology.
Yeah, exactly. There's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of stuff going on in these movies. I'm trying to think of some other movies that we've seen, but they deal with an awful lot of the human psyche, and not only how they deal with the horror that's going on, but the reality of their relationship to their family,
Hmm.
or their friends, or the situation around them, and they're really deep. And I, the horror in this movie to me wasn't the Babadook necessarily, but this poor woman and her frayed psyche of dealing with a minimum paying wage job that doesn't care about her, and her
Hmm.
flipped out son that's going off the rails and having to deal with it by herself, and
Hmm.
how her son has actually isolated her with no friends and no family. And to me, that was like super real, more real than the Babadook. And I was like, halfway through it, we don't even see the Babadook till halfway through it.
Hmm.
And I was like, this thing's a horror movie already, just dealing with this poor woman's life. I, I,
Yeah.
I'd give this kid away, or figure out a way to get rid of him if I could. If I could hand him back to the orphanage or whatever. This kid's a nightmare. This is
He is.
awful.
I mean, and that's really part of the thing is that I think through the movie, like for me, at the beginning, like I felt so emotionally connected to this mother that because I think and you were actually a stay-at-home parent for much of your life, weren't
Yeah,
you?
yeah,
So you know how all consuming children can be and
oh
how
yeah,
and I mean even and imagine like having a child who has behavioral issues and when you're at a point where you're feeling particularly weak and I was actually crying for her, like I was actually sobbing for all of these things that kept piling up on her.
yeah,
And then you're starting to get to points where you're like, this kid is actually really violent. I was sort of like, oh, this is child is sort of a psychopath, and how do you handle that? Where he's showing these budding signs of being a psychopath. But what you find actually is, I mean, him building weapons and
yeah,
um, pushing a girl out of a tree house. Although
yeah.
there's an explanation, I think, for that. That's like,
He was
it's a
pushed to
bullying
that.
kid. Yeah,
Yeah,
he kind of was. I was like, yeah, good pusher.
yeah,
Um, but he, at one point, the mom finds they're eating soup and together at the dinner table, her and her son, and she finds glass in her soup, and
yeah,
you're sort of going, whoa, like this kid is really problematic. He's talking a lot about death, and he's talking a lot about all of these things that are really sort of scary and disturbing. But
hmm,
you start to realize, like, oh my God, like this is, as you start to see more of the mom and more of like what she's going through and her reaction to things throughout the movie as it moves along, you really start to see like, wow, like this kid is really just reacting to this mom who is super depressed, hanging on by a thread, who's actually physically pushed him away, a few times when he's tried to hug her or sort of like emote toward her. And you think, okay, this is actually probably how a child who is psychologically damaged, who has been put through some kind of trauma, really feels, you know? And you start to look at things, I think, a little bit more from his point of view of what it must be like to be controlled or have your whole life controlled by a force that, you know, you can't control, by a parent who has to care for you, you know, when he's
Yeah.
like, I'm hungry, can you help me, you know, and the mom's just like, no. I mean, there's little you can do if you're a
Yeah.
child. You're really at the mercy of, and that reminds me a lot of a film that we saw called Oculus, where
Yeah.
these children are really at the mercy of their parents, and it's like you have so little power when you're a child that there's not a lot you can do. You can try to run away, but you know, so there are a lot of, like you said, there are a lot of different layers, and there are a lot of different themes in this that I think are absolutely legitimate, that are different, that, you know, he's not allowed to go in the basement near his dad's things. If he does, she gets really upset, you
Hmm.
know. And so he's sort of blocked out of the reasons why she's so upset and about his father, who he's never been able to learn about.
Hmm.
And she keeps it all to herself, and it just, bleh, you know, it just, all of this agony and everything barfs out of her, you know. And it's interesting too, because I noticed two things having to do with sexuality. He prevents her, or at least she sees that he's preventing her from, like, being a woman, you know.
Right.
He interrupts her, like, literally on the edge of orgasm when she's in her bed
I, that was
in the
really
mid.
awkward.
Oh my god, yeah, she has the vibrator and he walks in and
I
she has
knew
to
that
hide
was
it.
going to happen just
Oh,
as
I
soon as she
know.
pulled that thing out. I said, "This isn't going to end well at all."
So there was that, and then there was the time with the guy at her work who you could tell was really sort of interested in her, and they were sort of forming a kind of a little bit of a bond, or there was something kind of
Yeah.
budding there. And you know, he comes over and the boy like screams at him about something, and and then she's just exhausted, and she's basically like, you got to leave, man. I can't, this is, I can't move on. Like, I literally feel like I can't move on, you know?
Yeah. Well, I can't. I can't tell you how many times my wife and I would just put our head in our hands and say, "Thank God there are two of us." When I'm raising my daughter, and it wasn't even as bad as a child building a dart gun or whatever that kid was doing, or a
Right.
baseball thrower machine. I mean, it was, just her, crying nonstop for 3 straight days when she was a newborn or whatever. We were just like, oh my God, thank God there are two of us. And
Oh,
it's just like, it is, and to have a problem child as a single parent, I just don't know how it's done. And that's why that movie was a nightmare before the real scary stuff happened. That's why
yeah.
I was like, when the scary stuff happened, I was like, hey, you've already shown me this really scary
The
stuff
worst
ahead
of
of
it.
time. You can't scare me now. I mean, I've already seen the real life scary stuff. This is like, okay, whatever.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean,
But
I remember this. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. Well, going back to the glass in the soup, wasn't she already possessed kind of by the Babadook at that point? I mean, at some point, the the Babadook kind of went into her, and I'm wondering
Hmm.
if, and the sabotage of the picture of her, we didn't actually see the kid do that. The sabotage of the picture and her and the husband, and
Hmm.
then the soup and the glass and the soup. We didn't actually see the kid do that. She
Oh,
blames the
right.
kid,
Yes.
but I'm
Yes.
wondering if maybe her little Babadook, the Babadook had already kind of went into her at that point. We're
Hmm.
in the spoiler part, obviously, of this
Sorry, everyone.
analysis. The Babadook went into her, so I'm wondering: is there a possibility that maybe she sabotaged?
Oh
aside
yes, I
the,
think so. I
yeah,
didn't make it clear. Yeah, when I said I think you're absolutely right. I think this is a woman on the edge. She's starting to see these things that she's clearly been she's like she's blamed so much on her son, and we start the movie that way where we're sort of like pushing all of this, I don't know if you say blame to a child, but kind of we're crediting all of the bad behavior to this child. And I
well,
think that
yeah,
it's grown out of control. And I think she believes that he did it. And I think we believe at that point, maybe I felt like I wasn't sure, or I felt like she thought he did it. So we were,
yeah,
at least for me, I was on the precipice of like, okay, I don't think this kid did this. I think this is where we're starting to clarify that she's kind of not okay, you
yeah.
know?
I think she blames the blame. I think started with the birth of him because
Oh,
the
yeah.
husband died on the way to the maternity ward.
Oh, yeah, she holds so much resentment
Right,
against this kid that
right.
you really start understanding like, "Oh, this is why he has all of these behavior problems."
Yeah, she's got an awful lot of mood swings in this movie.
Oh, yeah, big ones.
Yeah, like a like a grandfather clock, man. That it just goes
Oh,
like a
yeah.
pendulum, just back and forth.
Yes, yeah, and I mean, I remember I think part of this too is just the discomfort you feel as a parent forever thinking anything close to these things where,
Right.
you're like so I mean, I can recall a couple times when I was, you have, I mean, obviously you always are controlling yourself. I mean, I hope everyone does this, but like you're controlling yourself, but you're responding to some sort of behavior where the child is pushing you because that's what children do.
Mhm.
But you feel sort of like worn out, or like you are lacking sleep, or you are, and you're just like, I am so angry right now, like I need to leave the room, so it's really like, I think it's a part of this film is that fear of losing that control.
Yeah, that's a good
And
point.
because that went right through me. I mean, that was like a chill where I'm like, "Oh my
Mhm.
god, like this is definitely, I think, a real fear that that parents have." And I remember I remember when my my daughter was just born, and my husband at the time, he and I were just like, I remember in the middle of the night we just would switch shifts, and he just said something like, "This is all a conspiracy. Why does everyone want you to have kids? They're just perpetuating this. It's horrible." And we were both like, it's a big ruse. And we were just beyond, I mean, we were just like absolutely insane. And and so I think I remember that really clearly. And then it took us a little while to adjust, I think, just because we were both going so overboard with trying to care for the baby that we were actually doing ourselves so much harm, that we were so on edge that we couldn't really function. And I think
Yeah.
that ends after, I don't know, like I think that was about 2 weeks or something, and slowly you start warming up to but it's like it's a thing that is like
Yeah.
there, and it's like, what is this? Like, it's
Yeah.
killing me. um
I
but
think
I
every parent goes through that. I
Yes,
totally remember
they do.
that. Totally
Yes, yeah,
remember
and
that.
you're like, "What did I do? Oh
Yeah.
my god, my
Why did I
life is
do
over."
this to myself?
Right, right, exactly, so I
Did
think part of
did
Oh,
we
yeah.
really make this? Why did we make this?
Why
Whose
did we
idea
make
was
this
this? Whose idea was this?
I know, exactly, and so we're so afraid to begin with about damaging
Oh, I know.
this thing you create. And I think there's actually this film that this director, oh god, I have to look up her name. Do you have it? Because
I
she's
I don't, but I
wonderful.
wanted to point out something, that this is a very movie top heavy with women making this. All the creative
Yeah,
roles are women that made this, which
yeah,
I'm sorry to say is noteworthy now in 2019. 10 years ago, it wouldn't have happened, but maybe 10 years from now, it won't be noteworthy, and it'll just people won't even mention it.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's noteworthy
exactly. Great
now.
point.
But it
Yeah,
actually was made, I guess, along. I saw the credits. I feel like it was made a little while ago.
2014
Yeah.
is
So
when it was
okay,
released.
so 5 years ago it was made. So
Mhm.
that's it's still pretty noteworthy that it was all made by. I mean, all the top jobs are filled by women.
Agreed. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with
So
you.
I
Yeah,
think that's a
that's
big
noteworthy.
deal.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I think it is. And this film came from a short that this director had created. It's about 10 minutes and it's on Vimeo and it is free, and
Oh,
it's
okay.
called The Monster. And it's just very short and very tight, and it inspired, and it's something that she had created. I don't know if it was in film school or what it was or afterward, but it's similar in a lot of ways. And I think she had cited one so my favorite director ever, David Lynch.
Hmm.
She was very inspired by him, and you can see it very clearly in this first film that she had directed, this short that she had directed. David Lynch is really, his first movie that he released took him 5 years to make, and it's called Eraserhead, and it
Yep.
basically have you seen this? I don't know,
I
but
saw
it's,
it back when I was in. I worked
I
at a record
wondered if
store
you might
back when I
have.
was 22,
Yeah, because that
20,
was like a
24.
midnight movie. Because
Yeah,
that was like,
exactly.
yeah,
Famous midnight movie.
yes. So, yeah, so that was very much about a father's feeling toward this foreign, toward a child, toward his child. There was this foreign thing. It's completely interrupting his life that was coming between him and his wife. He didn't know what to do with it. He was overwhelmed with fear from it, and so I think she took that theme and made it very, I don't know if she made it specifically female or not. I feel like was still a lot of metaphor. I think with him there was off the rails metaphor, and but this was and hers is much more linear, I think. But it was interesting to me because when I saw it, I was like, oh wow, like this. The movie itself, because I thought immediately of Eraserhead, and then when I saw the short, I was like, "Yep." So, if there are any Eraserhead fans out there, you should see this and watch the short. But yeah, very cool, very cool.
Okay.
At least to me personally.
Now, what part of this got a? I saw that it was funded by Kickstarter. Was the movie funded by Kickstarter, or part of the movie, or
I
what?
think part of the movie was. I think some of it was funded by like the Australian Film Council, and I only remember that because in an interview with the director, she had said something like, um, you know, part of the deal of taking this grant from the Australian government or the film society, whatever it was, arts committee or whatever, was that she had to film it within Australia, within a certain city, I think it was. And so they had to build that house
Mhm.
like from scratch. Like they had to build this house because there were very few Victorian homes like that. Um, and not only that, but she wanted it like decorated in a very specific way where it was all in, like the film is almost all in, like it's in muted colors. It's like blue, it's a ton of gray, black,
Mhm.
and so you really get a sense of this depression and this everything sort of closing in on her. And so so they had to they built this house from scratch, and she was kind of like, damn it, if only we could have found something. But in this city there were no homes like that had been around and that were in this style.
That is really interesting that
I
she
thought that
did.
was kind of cool. Yeah.
That is.
Because it looks, I mean, this is obviously, this is not the first time the magic of the movies has shown itself, but it was so authentic looking.
Yeah.
And it was just, especially because I think it cost $2 million to make.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
it was, yeah, I mean, it was really, it was, it's amazing that, the everything came together as it did, and the overwhelming talents of everyone involved just made this a full, like, just made this an excellent film, I
Ugh,
think.
the mom in there went through every single possible emotion and ran with it, just chewed up the scenery. She was so good and
Yeah.
so believable. That one scene where she finally gets a good night's sleep because she gives her son the sleeping pill, and she like
Yes.
floats down to her bed and just like, ah, she can finally get a good night's sleep, because that's the other thing. Not only is she ravaged by this kid, but she never gets any sleep because the kid never gets any sleep because he's afraid of
Right.
monsters. So she's
Yes.
not only going to a full-time job and dealing with this kid, but the kid never lets her get any sleep. And so,
Yes.
you know how that is. You go without a couple nights sleep and you're flipped out, and she's going without sleep for weeks at a time. And
It's
it,
such a parental thing to experience, because you're like, our deep inside of us, we have this kind of like primal need to take care of the child first, because I feel like that's kind of our biology, and we put ourselves second. And because of that, we also then have, like, well, at least she did. And I think once in a while we do too, where you have this resentment against this kid where you're like, why are you keeping me awake? I'm getting more and more, you know, um, I'm losing it. I'm losing a kid.
oh yeah,
So, so it's like this sacrifice that you kind of have to make and are driven to make through biology. And not only that, she's kind of like, she's really overly taking care of this child's demanding so much of her, and then her day job is to care for
mm-hmm.
senior citizens, like as a nurse, or as a, her sort of, her day job is, well, day job, she had no night job, was taking care of this, out of control kid, I guess.
Yeah,
But yeah, her job was caring for the elderly, so she was constantly forced into this
caretaking.
caretaker
Yeah.
role. And I think a lot of women are. I think many more men now are as well, but I think it's something specific that society, it's a role that society kind of has and continues to kind of force upon women as well.
Yeah, my wife works with the elderly. She's not a nurse, but she's an activities coordinator for the elderly, and she deals with dementia and um, the elderly. Let's see, she deals with dementia, and then the next level down, like people who are with it but still need a little help. I
Mhm.
forget what they're called.
What the category is called, yeah,
Yeah,
but
whatever the category is, like they're fine, but they still need help getting around. That's got a category.
mhm.
Um, so, but she said it's just like at certain points, it's like taking care of little kids again. So
Yeah,
this
yes.
woman is nonstop, a nonstop caretaker, and we haven't even got to the scary part of the movie. we're we've been dissecting the poor woman here, but I mean, that to me, that was really the movie. The scary parts of the movie um were more almost a manifestation of this woman's exhaustion, except at the end of the movie they're apparently raising a Babadook at the very end.
Yeah. What did you think about that? Because
I,
the ending, I mean, obviously we've already kind of ruined
yeah,
this
we're
movie
in
for anyone who
spoiler
hasn't seen.
territory. Yeah.
We should just say, like, at the beginning, like, spoilers, everyone, like, just deal with it. If you're coming afterward and you want to, like, think about what other people have to say, or, you have your theory and you want to kind of like interact with us in the comments about it, that's exactly, that's probably how you should use this.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty intense last 20 minutes where she flips her lid, and uh, the while she's fully possessed by the Babadook, and she utterly flips her lid, and um, and the kid strikes back and just stabs her with a knife, and she's just all beat up, and she vomits out this Babadook and um, faces it down up in the bedroom, this which turns into this sort of black staging area where she shouts it down, and the power sort of goes out of the Babadook and becomes like an empty puppet. But when she
Yeah.
reaches for it, like the life essence of it zips down into the basement, and they're now care and feeding for the life essence of this Babadook, which we never see, but it's apparently very powerful and eats worms that they feed it. They
Hmm.
pick up worms. She goes down and feeds it. Um, and it's kind of odd. It's got a like almost a happy ending because um, the people that are worried about the kid that who's been taken out of school, they come back and visit and say, "Oh, you've chosen a nice school for the boy to go to," and he seems to be a little bit relieved that they've got a Babadook and they're raising him, and monsters are real, and so it's almost like a relief to him that the monster's real, but they've got control of it. And so
Yeah.
it's like a relief to him that the monster's real, and she's almost relieved too. She's got like a beatific smile on her face, like, yes, we've picked out a school for my child, and he's going to start there, and we've had some things that we had to clean up, and they're both like almost serene that they've got this monster in their basement, but they've got control of it. So maybe that's why they're both happier. They both seem happier and at peace, maybe because they've got control of this monster.
I think so. I mean, I think in the book, well, so I think there are a couple things. The boy is seeing the mom's like pressure and anxiety and sorrow, like this huge amount of loss that she's dealing with and keeping contained. And to him, that's like the monster. And he promises her that he will take care of
Mm.
her and she needs to take care of him. And so when he's fighting her with his weapons, he keeps saying like I know it's not you, Mom. I know
Yeah.
this isn't you. And so I think that her facing down the monster is really her looking at for the first time, because the boy is saying the Babadook is real. The Babadook is real. And the mom's saying it's not real. Like, just like you would say, like I've lost my husband. I blame my kid. I'm going to shove that way down inside of me and not look at it. And the boy's like, look at it, look at it, And so I think that when she faces down the Babadook in the room, she is finally staring all of those horrible, ugly things
Mm.
right in the face. She's just, and it's not eating her alive because she's not letting it, but she's looking at it. She sees her husband die again. She sees all of these, she said all of these horrible things to her son who, and he sort of realizes that it's not her. She was sort of like, sometimes I wish it was you who died instead of him, all of these things that are so awful. Like, she just sort of gets it all out and looks at it. And so when she does that, because in the book it says, and the boy repeats it, oh gosh, what was the line in the book? It was something like he never leaves, or he's always with you, or you
Yeah.
can't
You can't
destroy
get
him.
rid of him.
You
Yeah.
can't get rid of the Babadook. Yeah. And so because you can't get rid of those awful feelings. You when someone dies, or when you feel these horrible things, if you just push them down, they are going to turn into this force that overtakes you. So I think that when she faced him down and he went down to the basement, I feel like he's a symbol of her being able to look at those scary, horrible things and acknowledging them. It's never going to go away. And I don't know that that they're necessarily raising it to become something bigger or better, but they're sort of like, okay, I see you now and I acknowledge you. And, you know, he flows over her when she goes
Hmm.
downstairs, and you do sort of think that, but that he's going to take over again, or and she sort of calms it down,
Hmm.
just like you would calm yourself down, I think, when you're like starting to kind of go crazy, and you're like, okay, let me just untie this knot of all these feelings and look at it and go, okay, I you're all there, it's okay, I have to keep you, but I'm going to control you now,
Hmm.
you know? So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I saw. And the boy was like, can I go down and see it? Can I go down and see it? And she was like, not until you're older. So I feel like she can, like, now at this point, she knows what he can handle and what she can't. And so while she's letting him into some of it and he's seeing some of it, she still is like, I'm not going to overwhelm you with this right now because I don't want it to gobble you up. But when you get older and you're stronger, and I can teach you about your father more, and I can, then this force is, we'll be able to control it together. So that's kind of what I saw that as. And it gave me hope. Like, I feel like if it would have just been abandoned, it would, if he would have just disintegrated or something, it's like that stuff never goes away. So it wouldn't have been
Yeah.
authentic. So her kind of controlling it, and, I mean, I think that was, I really liked that ending a lot, and I like that it was sort of truly happy. It was like,
Yeah.
hey, this thing still exists, but now that I know it's there and I can let go of a lot of this stuff, and I can control my feelings, I think that that it did make for like a really happy ending. So
Nice analysis. Very
thank
nice.
you. Thank you.
Very
Because I
good.
really, because it was a weird thing. And so when I was really starting to think about it, I was like, why wouldn't you be able to get rid of something? I don't know. So I thought it was really cool because usually, in sort of like possession movies or whatever, the force leaves or abandons you. But yeah, I kind of thought she extended the metaphor fully. This is
Yeah,
great.
truly did.
So yeah.
Good. So, do you recommend this movie to
Oh,
people?
I couldn't recommend it highly enough. I
Yeah.
think that it's such a I think that it has so many layers. I think if you're just someone who's like, I just kind of want to be scared, I think it has that to it. I think it has that dimension. I think that you can go as deeply as you want. And I mean, I'm sure that ending has 1,000 meanings to 1,000 different people. That's
Yeah.
just kind of what I thought. But, and I'm sure that if I watched it over and over again, I would even develop more theories. So I think this is a really rich, excellently made film that you cannot get tired of. I don't know. So I'm really in love with this film. I think it's wonderful.
I can't add anything to that. I totally agree 100% with what you said. Anything I said would be redundant. So I 100% agree. You need to see this movie. It's awesome. Especially the woman's performance. It is fantastic.
It is. It is.
Unbelievable. Whatever the Australian equivalent of the Oscars is and or are, she should have won it for this performance. Maybe she did. I don't know. Whatever they're
Yeah.
called, the Aussies or something. I don't know. But
Yeah.
she should have won because she's remarkable. And yeah, I agree with Jenny. It is you get a lot out of this movie. It is
Yeah.
it is not to be taken lightly. It is extremely deep and rich, as she said. So there you go.
Cool.
And it
Watch
only,
Babadook.
yeah, it only took us about 5 false starts to get to this movie. we, we had a few misfires, but we finally got to a movie this week.
Yep.
So great. Um, thank you for watching this movie with me, Jenny. And thank you, everybody out there, for watching. We appreciate everybody's watching our little broadcast. And as usual, we end it with saying that please feel free to leave a comment, and we will respond to all comments, and hit the like button, and please subscribe to OmniDog's Vault. And peace and love. Peace and love.